Allô, Nissan? Hey, grosse tempête, hein?
Hey, Karine, oui, je sais, les vilains bonhommes de neige sont de retour.
Mais avec le Nissan Rogue à traction intégrale, c'est pas stressant.
Exact, il est conçu et testé pour nos hivers. Oh, Karine, il y a un bonhomme dans le Rogue.
Ah, c'est correct. J'ai allumé les sièges chauffants.
Ah, bien joué, Karine. Maîtrisez toutes les conditions. Louez le Rogue S 2026 à partir de 0,4% jusqu'à 36 mois, incluant une réduction fidélité de 0,5% pour les clients Nissan admissibles. Jusqu'au 2 mars, sur approbation de crédit, les conditions s'appliquent. Détails chez Nissan.
I failed to tell you what the cover story was in The Islander. This is the very small local newspaper of northern Champlain Valley. The cover story, the cover of the newspaper, was a picture of a squirrel holding an acorn with standing on top of an owl statue. And I think that's important here. Now let's talk about small town news, but from north of the border. Let's focus on 23 bilingual municipalities in Quebec that have taken a bold step. They're asking a judge to suspend parts of the province's new language law. Let me go through the municipalities. Some of you live in these municipalities, but it's throughout this province, by the way. So we've got Baie-d'Urfé and Beaconsfield, right? Some of you live in Baie-d'Urfé and Beaconsfield. Then we go to other communities. Blanc-Sablon, Bonne-Espérance, Chichester, Côte-Saint-Luc, you live in Côte-Saint-Luc, Dollard-des-Ormeaux, Dorval, we've all heard of those spots. Havelock, beautiful community, just at the U.S. border south of here. Hopetown, Casabouzoua, Kirkland, L'Île aux Allumettes, Montreal-West, Mulgrave-Derry, New Carlisle, Pointe-Claire, Senneville, Sheenborough, Shigawackee, Stanbridge East, Wentworth, and last but not least, Westmount. There's your list of the 23 bilingual municipalities that are going to court. They are arguing that Bill 96 will cause them serious and irreparable harm with regards to their right to serve citizens in both English and French. Let's go to Julius Grey, Montreal-based constitutional lawyer, fighting this case with more on the case and the arguments here. Mr. Grey, welcome back to the program.
It's a pleasure.
So I went through the long list of the 23 municipalities. Why is this so important for those municipalities?
Well, it's important, I think, for all of the municipalities. They had affidavits which they signed showing the difficulties they have. It's perhaps particularly important for the very small ones. There are municipalities that have, less than 1,000 people and are 95% or something of that sort English speaking, where they will not be able to give contracts in any other language, and the capacity to do it is very difficult. Similarly, the idea of imposing duty to discipline and massive seizures and inspections in such municipalities it's a tremendous human cost. But I think all of them find it very important because we're talking about municipalities that are more than 50% or about 50% English speaking. And there's been a sort of way of living in Quebec for centuries, really, where those municipalities were able to accommodate the English speaking citizens. At present, and no one contests that, no one could possibly contest it, they also have a duty to accommodate their French-speaking citizens, and they have to provide all the services in French. But the idea of making it impossible to write a contract or do an oral contract in English, the idea of subjecting them to massive searches and seizures to check how much of the business is done in English or in French, when it obviously, given their population, it could be 50 or more, 50% or more, and all of the other things that are there, is a hardship. Now, remember, this is only a motion for a sursis. So whether we win it or lose it, it's not the end of the trial. But what is also important is that we're asking what should be the regime in place while we prepare a complete 4 or 5 or 6 day case to determine the law. And our suggestion was, I think it's a reasonable one, that we should keep the status quo, let them operate the way they've always operated until there is a fully prepared trial with perhaps witnesses to determine the future. I think it's very important to these municipalities not to have to switch their operation and then perhaps be able to switch it back to the original in 2 or 3 years. So these were all the considerations. But really, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that we're spending our time in a province in which the medical system, while excellent in principle, is creaky. It's creaky all over Canada, but here too. In a province in which we have problems of child protection and so on, that we're spending our time asking ourselves if a little town that's 1,000 people, of whom almost all are English, can do a contract in English. I mean, it is a waste of our legislative resources. That's why we had to turn to the courts.
Can I ask you, because obviously the government used the notwithstanding clause preemptively, right, for Bill 96. Right. So even if they use Bill 90, the notwithstanding clause, you can still challenge this? It doesn't act as some sort of shield from challenges like yours?
Yes, this is a very important point, and this is one of the most important cases, the issues in this particular litigation, which of course will have to be resolved sooner or later at appeal or Supreme Court level. The notwithstanding clause prevents you, as the law is presently interpreted, prevents anybody from challenging the law and getting it set aside. It does not prevent interpretation favorable to the Charter. Our arguments are not that the law is necessarily invalid, but that the law can be interpreted in such a way as to permit it. What it is there are certain rules saying contracts will be in French and so on, but there's Article 26 of the law, which says municipalities recognized as bilingual are entitled to have all of their communications in English or French, or rather than and. And so we're arguing that it's a point of interpretation. And when it comes to interpreting the law, the values of the Charter are still presumed to be enforced, notwithstanding the invocation of the derogatory clause. And there was a case in 2018 called Quebec and Caron, which said that in all Quebec legislation, you have to interpret it in accordance with Charter values, and that has nothing to do with the notwithstanding clause.
And Mr. Grey, I certainly appreciate a good pun every now and again. We're with Julius Grey, Montreal-based constitutional lawyer. We're talking about the challenge from 23 bilingual municipalities to Bill 96 and certain sections of Bill 96. Mr. Grey, can I ask you, because it's I did the list here, the 23 bilingual municipalities that are challenging. It's not all the bilingual municipalities of Quebec. Is there anything that I can take away from the fact, and I have a listener saying the TMR is bilingual, has chosen not to fight this battle. Can we take away anything from that?
Yeah, well, you can assume that some people have chosen to fight it. I know Hampstead has a separate action. I haven't studied it in detail, but I presume it will be heard on the merits at the same time. I don't know about TMR. I take a mandate that I get from my clients. So maybe there are some that haven't chosen to do it. I know that there would be many municipalities which are not under Section 26 which would like to challenge some parts of it, but that would be a different issue and would be a different case.
And just looking at the list of the 23 municipalities, and I was putting them on the map here, and Île-de-la-Madeleine and Gaspésie, and right to the western border of Quebec towards Ottawa, it seems like, and Havelock just at the southern border, it seems like you've gotten towns here, municipalities, east, west, north, south, all over the province.
Yeah, it's not just Montreal. Montreal is, of course, the center of English-speaking Quebec. it used to be much more diverse. I mean, I remember the Eastern Townships were very largely English in the early part of the 20th century. But right now, there are still municipalities all over the province where the majority is English-speaking. And it's not simply a Montreal issue. And it's particularly important for those municipalities. In Montreal, there is a certain amount of there are facilities and so on, whereas those other municipalities are in some ways out on their own.
Mr. Grey, unfortunately out of time, but I want to thank you so much for coming on and discussing this court challenge.
Okay, bye-bye.
That's Julius Grey, Montreal-based constitutional lawyer and senior attorney at Grey Casgrain.